Hey, this is Dan with the Video Game Collecting Podcast. Hey, this is Dan with the Video Game Collecting Podcast. Today's episode is with Dominator. How you doing?
Pretty good, Dan. How are you?
Good. I forgot to say, Dominator is his IG handle, but I just thought that'd be a cool nickname, too. Dominator.
Funny story about that. Actually, all of my packages that come from WADA, they're addressed to Dominator from when Rob was working there. I knew him from the comic book days, and I put my normal name in on the thing, and he went out and changed it. He said, no, you're going to be the Dominator. So.
Must be awkward if you ever had to go to UPS and get a package and, can I see your ID?
That's the problem. The name originated from an email I had back in high school, and I kind of just never changed it. Because, my full name is Dominic. So, I just never really changed it. Probably should do it at some point, but I think it's too late now.
Keep it. It shows you're a kid at heart, But no, when I was one of my first emails was Dr. Nick because of The Simpsons. Hey everybody, hey Dr. Nick, and when I went to spell it on AOL, it was I was so young I spelt it incorrectly. So instead of two O's, it's DOCTERNICK at AOL.com. I don't have it anymore. And I thought it was so cool I got the email, but the only reason I got it because I spelt it wrong. I mean, this is 1990 whatever, but no. And if that was a Gmail, I would have kept it forever. It's just AOL's not exactly up to date.
Hey, my very first email was dom@toast2.net.
I should have kept it. Would have been golden.
I should have.
But no, let's jump into your story and your origin, your genesis of collecting. What kicked you off as a video game player? What was that first system, game? What type of controller?
So I actually have a bit of a unique story. Maybe I think it's unique. I don't know. Maybe it's not. But as a kid, I actually never owned a video game system. I grew up in a fairly conservative household, and my parents were okay with video games, but for some reason my dad never really wanted them in the house. So I was allowed to play as much as I want at a friend's house, if I went over any family members' houses. But as far as in our household, I never had a system growing up. I actually didn't even get a system until I got married and I moved out, believe it or not. But I still had a decent amount of exposure because, every kid in the 90s had, an N64 and a PlayStation 1 or a PlayStation 2 in the early 2000s. So I still got a lot of experience, with systems, but...
I have to correct you, is not everyone had one because you didn't.
It's true. It's true. Everyone except for me, we should say.
No, that's unique, man. I mean, that's something... I'm glad that you followed past, so keep going. I had to point that out.
Yeah, no, fair. But yeah, so I still played all of the best games because whenever you go over to your buddy's house, they do all the work of trying all the games and buying them and figuring out what's good or not. So I kind of just got to play the cream of the crop. So all of the stuff that's really nostalgic for me is all of, for the most part, the best games, on the system. Mario Kart 64 and Super Smash Brothers, Grand Theft Auto, just all this stuff that was really special. And, that stuff still holds a pretty special place in my heart today just because all of the memories I have are with those games.
No, that's cool. I know one of my favorite games was Maximum Carnage, and I'd never owned it. It was my next door neighbor who owned it, and I always had a special, memory. And that was even with Earthworm Jim. I didn't own it. It was my next door neighbor. But you're over there enough where you might as well own it because you play it so much.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I played Super Smash Melee on GameCube almost every day over my buddy's house. We just did every single day. I put so many hours into that game that... I didn't even own. I went over my best friend, Mitch. I actually beat Skyrim on my own profile over his house.
Nice. That's a good friend.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, seriously. It was pretty special. Mitch is a good guy.
So you mentioned that you got your first system once you got married.
I did. It was an Xbox One.
Man, you have a good wife because, going into gaming after getting married, I feel like it's something you have to ease in because spending that time, hitting the sticks, playing games when they get home from somewhere is kind of difficult.
It was kind of interesting because like I said, with it being my first system, so I mean, obviously, I just wanted to play it, all the time. And unfortunately, my wife she's very understanding. She's actually a gamer herself. We even to this day we still play a lot of video games together. So she was very understanding, which was really good for me.
I was gonna say she's a keeper then.
Most definitely a keeper. She put up with a bunch of crap when I first started collecting. That's for sure.
Nice. I'm sure she's happy with it now. So when did you start starting with Xbox One, when was it that you bought something? Did you buy an older system to play? How'd that go?
So, I mean, I've been a collector as long as I can remember, just normally of other stuff. I mean, I had bug collections, of dragonflies when I was a kid, and kind of just moved up from there. I got to the point where I collected exotic fish for one point. I had a giant 300-gallon fish tank in my living room with freshwater stingrays in it and all sorts of stuff. I was all over the forums. I was pretty much the Dennis of the exotic fish keeping world. And it was pretty fun, actually. It was a good time, but all of those hobbies that I had in a kid just lost me tons and tons and tons of time and money, and they unfortunately didn't turn out into anything other than good memories, but it's still something that I look back on fondly. But after that point, in 2012, that's when I got married, my wife actually bought me a New Mutants 98, which, was the first appearance of Deadpool, because I said I wanted to have it on the wall of my office. And that kind of kicked off a collecting point, or a collecting switch for me, where I really started liking comic books and buying comic books. And that process led me to C2E2 in April of 2018, which coincidentally was where Dennis and Ken set up as WADA for the very first time. That was their public debut, so to speak. And fortunately, through a friend of mine, I was adjacently invited to Dennis's house. I didn't know Dennis at all. I never talked to him. Didn't know any of the video game people at all. But a good comic book friend of mine, Yaniv, was invited to his house, and I was at the show with him. He was like, "Hey, you want to go to this guy Dennis's house? They do video games." I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "I like video games,
So I'm imagining you're like, "Yeah, let's go," and then you get there. Where's the beer? Wait, you guys are actually showing video games? What the hell?
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I was interested, but not in like I didn't really think too much of it until I walked down the steps into Dennis's basement. And let me tell you, if you've never walked down the steps into Dennis's basement, if you ever get the opportunity, you 100% should. It was an eye-opening experience. I mean, the amount of just cool stuff that he has down there to look at, I mean, it's enough to turn even the most obstinate non-collector into, oh, that's really cool, I want to buy that. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, I saw the passion that they had for games and just how cool all the old systems were. He has, just boxed to the Super Nintendo variants, like a whole, like it looks like a wall, but it's just Super Nintendo boxes. And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I mean, I like comic books a lot, but I mean, that was a really, really eye-opening experience.
I can imagine someone that's not into collecting walking into that basement and then being like, "Oh, this is creepy," and walking backwards.
No. Well, actually, the funny part is when you walk down, the lights are always off because light bad for games. So actually, when you first went down, it is a little bit creepy if the lights are off. I'll give you that.
It's great that it's kind of legendary of Dennis's basement, and so that's awesome to that was kind of the moment where it kind of switched things. And I came from comic books too, it's not that I didn't collect games, but there was a point where, okay, games win out, and it's not that I don't like comic books at all, but I never really read them. I'll be honest. I was more into collecting covers.
Yep. I did not read any comic books as a child either. I just same as you. I like the covers. I like the people I met. It was, it was really fun, but the games are special.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing is I think I'm going to take a stab here, but this is at least my perspective is, we collected, a lot of us have that collector, itch, bug, whatever. And it wasn't till video games we found the calling of, okay, this is something I could sink my teeth into. We were looking for something, and comics books are cool. I love the Marvel universe and all that, and I love the images. But it wasn't till video games where it's like, okay, this is my calling of collecting. Is that kind of similar to you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely circled around, and I was really, really serious about collecting a lot of different things over the years. But games definitely took the biggest hold for sure. It seems like every new thing is just a little bit better than the last. And the jump from games to comics. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some comics that I would love to own again. Ones I've sold in the past. I mean, I used to have a Silver Streak 6. It's for sure one of my favorite books, and I would love to own one of those again. But I just the amount of really quality stuff across the systems is pretty unparalleled.
At least for me, it's, you know, with video games, you can still find, at least this early on, there is stuff that will become those comics that were out of hand. Like, I'll never own a Batman one, but the Batman one of video games is still within reach. Yeah, a certain variant or whatever, that's a little bit different. But like, if you want an SMB one, it's still within striking range these days. Yes, it's thousands of dollars, but it's still within that range. And I don't know if there's any games that are just completely out of range that if you want any variant that, you know, it's out of range.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really big part of it. I mean, it got to the point where I had a fairly substantial Golden Age collection. I mean, that's what I really liked for the most part, was the really rare Golden Age stuff. And it just got to the point where everything that I wanted from my collection was $10,000 or more. And it just got to the point where I could get one book a year, 2 books a year, maybe, if, you know, like saving really hard. Because I mean, I'm fairly young. I didn't have a really high-paying job or anything, so it was a struggle to collect. And video games were so refreshing because you could get really, really, really cool stuff for not that much money back in, you know, early 2018, 2019.
Yeah, but like if you put the time into it, even today, you can find cool stuff out there, I think, at least my perspective. Yeah. And the funny thing, I was into Golden Age too. Timely's were a big passion of mine. Timely, Alex Schimberg comics, you know, and like you said, it's a very difficult thing to collect because the ones you really want are tons of money. And even when you find them, you got to kind of sacrifice on condition or restoration. So, but to go to the video game part, it's kind of like, no, you can go find a lot of these games. Yeah, it might be a broader net, but they're out there, you know, and you can find CIBs. You can make a collection that you grew up with, which I think that's the part that's a lot different, at least for me. It's like, no, I've always had a passion to play and enjoy video games, so collecting them just makes sense. And I think it will make sense for a lot of people.
I couldn't agree more.
So you go into Dennis' basement and he lets you out. Surprised. He lets you out of the basement. You're one of the few lucky ones to survive. What happened from there?
So after that point, I kind of just slowly started transitioning into buying more and more stuff. And Dennis and Ken and Josh were so instrumental in helping that early stage, because I made a Nintendo Age account on RIP. And there was a lot of really great information on there. So I was kind of just scouring Nintendo Age, trying to figure out, you know, what's the right stuff to buy, how to correctly identify reseals, all of this stuff. And, you know, if I ever had a question, it was a text to Josh being like, hey, buddy, you remember me? How do I tell if this is resealed or not? And they were all fortunate enough to give me more than a helping hand throughout my early collecting career. So I ended up buying some pretty decent stuff fairly early on. I remember Dennis told me back at one of the early shows, I want to say it was Too Many Games 2018, where him, Josh, and I were talking about third-party hang tabs and stickers and, you know, kind of just how hard they are to find. So we ended up just kind of walking the show floor and just pulling out everything with a sticker on it or everything with a hang tab on it and kind of just going through it. And this was back when, you know, everything was under $100. I think the very first matte sticker Mario I bought for $75 off of eBay early 2018. It was just sitting there, bin, just doing its thing, and just no one really knew at that point. The information just wasn't there. So I kind of just started buying all that stuff. And my very first collecting goal was to do the full CIB third-party hang tab set and the full CIB sticker set. That's kind of where most of my focus was really early on, was just collecting those CIBs and trying to learn the sealed market a little bit better, because that was a little more challenging to me, and the price was cheap for what the stuff was, but it was more than I wanted to spend on, you know, raw DuckTales for $800 or whatever. It was kind of a lot at the time. It seems silly now, though.
Well, yeah, and in hindsight, everything seems silly, but at the time, that's even when I bought my SMB3 for $300, that seemed like, oh, I'm just wasting money. It wasn't a comfortable decision.
Yeah, I think that's how much I paid for mine, if I remember right. It was sitting on eBay. I was like, should I buy this? I was like, there's 30 of them on eBay, and I was like, yeah. I was like, I guess.
Well, it's funny because like I had a closet with my collectibles like 8 years ago, and there'd be all these stacked games, and that was the one graded VGA game, and then there's comics, statues, and stuff like that. But it was funny how the box stuff to me was always special and really stood out, but it wasn't till later, till more of the WADA days, that it became something. Okay, there's the confidence. I always go back to, the confidence now we have. But before the confidence was there of a market that you could be like, hey, if I buy this, I probably could sell it for what I paid for. Wasn't there, What should games be worth? I don't know. I don't know.
It definitely took me a good amount of time to become a true believer, we'll say, of the graded market, where I more got into it just because I thought it was cool and I really liked it and it was nostalgic. But I was very hesitant to put, a decent amount of money into it at first until I really saw what happened, especially with Heritage. I mean, once the Heritage stuff happened, it was game over. I mean, I remember that first auction. It was groundbreaking.
Mm-hmm. No, that's, you know what, they strategically went about that very well. So going into 2020, you found a collection, I believe, early 20?
Kind of. I bought a few games off of a local guy, a couple sticker seal games for my collection. I want to say I got a Matt Pinball, a Popeye, and maybe a couple other games. And he told me about a collection that he bought from a thrift store for just tons and tons and tons of sealed games for not very much money. And in that collection, he had a really, really nice ice climber. It was a matte ice climber. It was beautiful. It's one of the nicest ones I've seen. And this was a CID copy. And that copy, we ended up not being able to make a deal on it. He ended up putting it on eBay for a significant amount more than I was willing to pay. And it sat on eBay for a while, and I would go back and check on it and shoot him a text every once in a while to see if he changed his mind, and he never did. And then the raw Dr. Wright Mega Man popped up on eBay. And it popped up for open auction. There's a lot of hustle and bustle about it. There's a lot of people were going for it. It was raw. I want to say it was in like an 8.0 range, roughly. And I was trying to figure out how to buy it. But as I was looking at the pictures, the eBay names seemed familiar, so I clicked on the guy's profile, and sure enough, it was the same guy with the ice climber, and I didn't even really realize it at the time. So I just shot him a text. I was like, hey, you have anything else, sealed? Because I saw you post the Mega Man for sale. And he said, yeah. He's like, I have a bunch of stuff. He's like, I'm not super interested in selling it. I was like, that's fine. I was like, I'm looking for sealed third-party hang tabs. Like, if you have any, let me know. And he's like, you mean the ones with, the little cardboard cutout on the back? I said, yeah. So he shoots me a picture of a Stinger and a Trojan. I said, that's it. I was like, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And he was like, all right. He's like, we can meet up and we can take a look. I was like, sure. I was like, have anything else? Bring it along. So I scrounged together as much cash as I could get. And I met the guy, and he had that and probably 10 or 15 other really, really nice sealed games. They were all from the same collection. They all had this Rockaway sales sticker on. It was really, really cool. And these were the same games that he was telling me about the prior year. And we ended up making a deal for all of that stuff. And as we were going through everything, I found that he had a lot more. So I bought as much of that stuff as I could. I think I used all the cash that I brought, and we made an agreement to meet up the following day, and he would bring the rest of the stuff he had. So he did, and we went through game by game. It was a little bit of an arduous process, but it ended up working out in the end. And I want to say I bought 48 sealed NES games, all from the same collection, most of them in really nice condition. I mean, that was probably the high point of my collecting career, was getting all of that stuff. It was pretty amazing to see really high tier NES stuff in really good condition, all from the same collection. It was legendary.
Okay, let's go over each game. I'm just kidding. What are the ones that really stand out in your memory of like, hey, this? So
I scrounged together as much money as I could, but I kind of knew that I was going to have to sell a decent amount of it to recover financially from buying all that. So unfortunately, I ended up selling some of the really good stuff. There was a Hang Tab Wild Gunman that ended up grading a 9.4. Wow. It was actually one that ended up in a heritage auction at one point. I think it went for $30-some thousand or something, which was significantly more than I sold it for, but you know, is what it is. So that was definitely a highlight. There's a beautiful Stinger, a Hang Tab early Konami game, Hang Tab Trojan, Circle Seal Metroid, Circle Seal Castlevania, just really, really spectacular stuff that you just don't see.
And I will buy them. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's awesome. So what do you still have what's still in your collection that you really are proud from that collection that makes you, when you look at it, you're like, oh, that was that collection?
So I still have the Stinger, the Trojan, the Castlevania, and the Metroid. Those were the four that I really, really, really wanted to focus on keeping. And then there were a couple other decent games. There was a couple Ninja Gaidens, and Ninja Gaiden, a Top Gun, and a couple other ones. I ended up trading those for a Hang Tab Rygar, a sealed one. So those kind of, whenever I see the Hang Tab Rygar, I kind of remember that collection that enabled me to get that for the most part. But definitely those four, the Stinger, the Trojan, the Castlevania, and the Metroid are those are the four big ones.
Is the Metroid and are those Hang Tabs?
They are not, unfortunately. The only two Hang Tabs were the Stinger and the Trojan. Cool. The other ones they're early. I mean, they're still Circle Seals, which is really, really, really hard to find, especially in decent condition.
Oh yeah, I mean those are amazing. Let me be clear, like hands down, that I still am super jealous, and I'll trade half my collection for one. But no, I was just kind of curious because like have to ask. It's just as a collector, you're like, okay, what variant?
It's actually funnily enough, there was actually a bunch of other early games that could have had Hang Tabs, but they didn't. I think there was a Burger Time, there was a Load Runner, Tag Team Wrestling. There was one other one that could have had a Hang Tab that didn't. So there was a bunch of really early games. It seemed like it was mainly an early '88 collection. From what I could tell, it seemed like most of the games were probably from late '87 to '89. There was a handful of games that were a little bit later, like there was a Rambo. But for the most part, they were all fairly condensed from years. Nothing crazy late, nothing super, super crazy early, like no stickers or anything.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, that's the type of story I'm sure a lot of people listening like to hear, is finding those great collections, and some of those games we see highlight auctions today. I think it's great when anyone finds a collection. Yes, we can't keep everything, nor should we. It's kind of, it's great that you're able to find the collection, get it out into the community. But yeah, let's go forward. Now, with the whole market doing what it's doing, are you switching what you're looking for? Have you gotten into new systems?
So, like I said, originally when I started, it was almost to find an affordable, an affordable outlet where I could continue to collect and buy stuff. And for a long time, I really, really focused on Nintendo cardboard. But at this point, I'm kind of priced out of most of the really, really top tier stuff. I mean, it's kind of gotten to that point where I was at with comics where, most of the stuff that I would like to add to my collection, I just can't really afford to pay outright for it anymore. So I've really been focusing a lot on some of the later stuff, GameCube, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 1, some of that kind of stuff, a little bit Game Boy Color here and there, Game Boy Advance. And that stuff, I mean, there's a lot more of it out there, and it is a lot more attainable for your average person, and that's what I really enjoy. I mean, whenever I collect anything, I always try and get stuff that I think has potential and stuff that I think I can collect and feel good about buying, and that's the main thing, where it's hard to feel good about spending that much money on NES now, which obviously it's still going. I still think it's going to go up. I still believe in it, but I really like buying the undervalued stuff that people aren't really looking at.
Anyone that says they don't like to buy undervalued or pay attention to the price is probably not being responsible with their money at least a little bit. But I think these days it is kind of we feel like we have to explain ourselves when it comes to I bought something and I sold it. But time is money. Not everything has to be money, but at the same time, like if someone's willing to give you $1,000 for $100, you'd be like, why wouldn't you? You know, it'd just be.
Don't get me wrong. I have absolutely no problem with people spending 40, 50, 60, $500,000 on games. I really don't. I just can't afford it. I mean, if I had the money, I definitely would. But as it stands, I currently do not.
Hopefully soon, right? But
hopefully, maybe, we'll see.
No, nothing against paying full price. Like I pay full price for stuff I like and stuff that I think is maybe the market's undervaluing. So, there's nothing wrong with whatever people pay. I just think, there's nothing wrong for getting stuff at cheaper prices. Actually, I think that's great. And I think it's great either way because people buying video games is enjoying the hobby. But,
Yep.
So with your collection and where you're pushing now, is there any fun finds recently that you've discovered where you're like, hey, I found this Game Gear game? Or
not too much individual stuff. I did actually have a really, really cool buy late 2020. I think it was October, maybe September, October, where I actually ended up purchasing a giant sealed disc-based collection. This guy had, I want to say, 230 PS2 games, like 150 Xbox games. I want to say there was 110 PS1 games and a bunch of Wii stuff, a bunch of Xbox 360, a bunch of GameCube. And all in all, it was just over 1,000 sealed disc-based games. And this was right before PS2 and PlayStation 1 really, really exploded, late 2020. And I was able to actually purchase everything at a fairly agreeable price, especially, looking at today's prices. And that really kicked off the PlayStation stuff for me, where it got to the point where it was like, okay, this stuff is really out there. You can actually find this stuff. It's attainable and it's significantly cheaper. And just going through all those games, I mean, there was games I didn't even realize existed. Like really, really, really cool PS2 games, really cool PS1 games that I had no idea. I mean, the library is just massive on those systems, and there's just a glut of stuff you can collect that is, $100, $150, or even less.
Yeah, no, that's the thing where people complain about the pricing, but there's still so many great games at affordable prices. I mean, even just cart collecting, you can own so much great stuff that's cheap. Even CIB is still relatively cheap. Now, yeah, if you want the best, you can't expect not to pay best pricing. But with that being said, you can buy something really cool. You could collect PS2 sealed, and it's still relatively cheap. Like 99% of the titles. So,
absolutely.
But yeah, with that, is there anything that you would suggest with collecting to someone new in the hobby, what to collect and how to start out in this hobby?
It's funny. Actually, the longer I collect, the more and more my friends will ask this question. People, who've seen me collecting stuff for a while, and they're like, hey, what should I buy? And I always just tell everyone, just buy what you like. Buy what you played as a kid. I mean, in my opinion, if you're collecting, just for monetary gain, which, some people do, it's fine. I feel like it's a lot harder to enjoy it versus just buying what you really like. I mean, if you grew up playing Mario Kart 64, you should go out and buy a Mario Kart 64. I mean, buy whatever you can afford. If you can afford a nice CIB, great. If you can afford a sealed one, even better. But it's like that, especially with the newer systems where there's a lot more availability, where, you can go out and buy a Super Monkey Ball on GameCube, and it's really not that bad. And that might be the game that you loved as a kid, or Skies of Arcadia. A friend of mine absolutely loved Skies of Arcadia. So I told him, just go out and buy one. And even if that's the only game you buy, at least it's one you can be happy with,
Yeah, exactly. And that's collect what you love. I think that's the thing we come back to each time is like collect what you love, and you're going to enjoy what you have at that point. And it's more than just a material good. It's a memory.
Absolutely. And if you do that and, you do collect what you love, I mean, you can always branch out. I mean, that's kind of how collecting works. You collect all the stuff you're familiar with, and then you branch out to some stuff that maybe you weren't familiar with that you would like to be. And that's how someone who never played an NES game, as a kid ended up with a whole bunch of NES stuff. It's just cool. It's significant. It's historical. There's just a lot of really, really interesting stuff that escaped you as a child that, you can have as an adult that still makes you feel really good about collecting.
No, definitely. With that being said, is there anything you're playing right now? Do you play some of the older games? Do you play newer games? What you're playing?
Most of the stuff I play is newer. I'm pretty bad at old games, if I'm being honest. I'm a terrible platform player. For the life of me, I can't do it. So a lot of times if I try and play a retro game, I normally end up frustrated. So most of the times I stick to some of the newer stuff. A lot of the RPGs, I played Red Dead Redemption a lot. I played Skyrim a ton. I still play that on the Switch, which they just ported to the Switch a year or two ago. So I re-beat Skyrim on the Switch. And then as far as really, really current stuff, I play a lot more PC games than I do console games. I play Valorant a lot, Escape from Tarkov, Call of Duty. So a lot of mouse and keyboard stuff.
Well, that's cool. No, I used to play PC. Is kind of funny because there wasn't a lot of games I played, but it'd be like StarCraft or Warcraft 2. Yeah. But there's always those games, and early on it was Quake. I think Quake, or was it Quake 2? The one you could play online. I can't remember which one it was. But when I had a 56K modem, so if someone called, it would cut out the game. I'd yell and get really pissed off. But those were fun days of early PC playing. But that's cool, and I'm glad you're still able to game a bit. And I do think any amount of gaming is always a wonderful thing, because I think, I do think it's, as long as it's enjoyable, and not getting frustrated at your NES and.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of the old NES stuff is cool. I mean, I do a lot of I resell a lot of like CIB stuff and like loose NES cards and loose Super Nintendo cards, and stuff I get at garage sales and flea markets or Craigslist or however I come by it. So I've tested out a decent amount of games. I mean, there's some really fun ones. One that I actually thought was pretty fun that I never heard anyone talk about was actually Solar Jetman for the NES. Every time I get one of those and I test it out, I always just have fun, swirling around in your little spaceship shooting little laser beams. It's just a good time. I mean, it's not like you're doing anything, super crazy or special, but it's just fun. I mean, there's just some fun stuff out there that gets really overlooked.
Now, you mentioned you go out to swap meets and such, flea markets, garage sales to find stuff. How's that been? And do you go still during the pandemic? How is it finding stuff? How is it buying loose cards? Do you have to clean them up?
So, yeah, it's since the pandemic hit, I haven't been out as much, swap meets or flea markets or anything like that. But all of 2019, and that was pretty much all I was doing. And let me tell you, there are some grimy NES cards out there, man. They are just it looks like they've been dipped in tar. I mean, but the funny thing is I've only ever not been able to get like 2 or 3 games working. I mean, they're incredibly resilient. Like, I know, like, if you just throw them in your NES, they're probably not going to work. But if you clean them up, man, it's absolutely incredible, how a 30-year-old game can still work every single time if you give it a little love. I mean, there's a secret solution that I use that I'm not going to give out that is just, it's incredible. I mean, it's absolutely incredible.
I'm going to spoil it for you, Dom. It's rubbing alcohol. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Boom. Yeah, sorry. No one ever tried that, and I'm going to start selling it and calling it Dobbs secret sauce.
I'm just kidding. I actually what I do is it's just a little bit of, I don't even know, this is probably not even that good for games, and someone's probably going to yell at me, but whatever. Tell me something better. So I take a little bit of rubbing alcohol and a little bit of stovetop cleaner, and you rub them together, and the stovetop cleaner, the rubbing alcohol kind of like congeals it a little bit. And you just get a Q-tip and you rub it along the contacts, let it sit for a little bit, and then you get a paper towel and you wipe it off, and they come out shiny clean, and you don't take too much of the gold off.
Nice. No, that's definitely something I hadn't thought about, but I just use rubbing alcohol. I'm old-fashioned, what can I say? But that's probably, what you're doing is probably a lot better.
So, like I said, I don't know if it's like more damaging in the long run, but I mean, if it comes to the point where rubbing alcohol isn't going to get your game to play, I mean, at that point, like, it's not going to play anyway. So like, they might as well have it work for at least some period of time versus not working at all.
Yeah, no, and to make sure, because of the disclosures of the United States federal law, no one should be sniffing, drinking, or smoking. Just kidding. It's funny just to watch out for them lawsuits. But no, it's cool because like I used to go out and look for games for years, and I'm kind of curious post pandemic how much crazier it is going to be looking for stuff at garage sales and swap meets. And I mean, I haven't been in years, but it used to be crazy back then. Like I'm talking 5 years ago, it used to be like that was the hardest thing to find. I could find other stuff that was undervalued, whatever. But video games, I mean, oh man, if I missed a cardboard game, that sucked, just, you don't see it much.
Yeah, even back when I was doing the same thing looking for comic books, I mean, the amount of games that you find is vastly inferior to all of the comic books and other collectibles that you see, Pokemon cards and baseball cards and stuff. I mean, box games, there are not nearly as many out there at garage sales and swap meets as, most other collectible type things.
Well, I found that, like, people, usually when they're there, people see people that aren't even into games. If they're out there, they're usually really cheap, so they get picked up really easily. And that's the hard part. If they're $1 a piece, they're not going to last past the first person that sees them. It's
true. I mean, even back when I was looking for comics, I mean, if I saw cheap NES stuff, I mean, I didn't even know what it was. I would buy it if they were a couple bucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's, nowadays it'll be interesting. I'm really kind of looking forward to post-pandemic and being able to go to shows. That's going to look a lot different too.
That is what I'm looking forward to most out of everything that's going to come back in the collecting world at, garage sales, swap meets, and shows is definitely the shows. I mean, the shows there's just such a good time. I mean, Too Many Games is incredible. C2E2 was a lot of fun. I did the Midwest gaming convention. That was a good one. I met a lot of people there. Actually, a funny story about that show was the first, I believe I only went to it one time. It was in Milwaukee, I want to say. And I went for the full, 2 days or whatever it was. And at the end of the last day, I went to, go fly home because I'm from the East Coast. And my flight got canceled because of a freak snowstorm that happened. And every single flight out of Milwaukee got canceled, pretty much all at the same time. So you had people sleeping on the floor, like people just everywhere. The buses were all full. Every single hotel in Milwaukee was booked. There were people trying to get like Ubers to Chicago just to have somewhere to sleep because they couldn't get any flights out until, I want to say, the following night or like the following day because of the amount of snow that they had. And so thank God Dennis and Ken set up, WADA at that show. So I called Dennis and I begged him for a place to sleep that night, and he let me sleep on his couch, which was a godsend because I would have been sleeping on the airport floor that night.
Oh no, that would have been better. No, just kidding. It's always funny that we don't realize how much we miss something till it's gone. And with shows, it definitely is something I know we all miss. I really look forward to the first big show that everyone's able to make it to, and really, see everyone in person, and hopefully people are happy and positive about everything because, there's a lot to be happy about in this community. Going forward, I think I'm screwing up this line, but, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your experience and your wisdom. What would you say I'm fucking all this up. No, no, I was just going to say, I really appreciate you coming on and giving your story. It's not, it takes courage, I always say, to come out and stick your neck out. So with that being said, what's some last words for the community, the people listening, your friends that are listening? What's something going forward, for the rest of 2021 about this community and this crazy thing we collect?
Don't chew me out for the way I clean NES games.
Well, that's too late. That's not going to happen. That's already on recording, man. I ain't cutting that shit out.
No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, the one thing that I would like to see is a little more transparency. I feel like the game collecting community is really tight-lipped as a whole. I mean, a lot of private sales are really, really hush hush. And I mean, I'm sure everyone, has their reason, but I mean, at this point, like, everyone's collections are worth a lot of money. I mean, if you have anything sealed, it's worth a lot now. And I feel like if everyone kind of just communicated a little bit and was really transparent, it would just make the whole aspect a lot cleaner and a lot easier. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying everyone come out and flood Instagram with all your stuff and whatnot, but there's a lot of really hush hush stuff, and I mean, and information which makes the world go around. It people say it's money, but I think it's information, man. And the more information that's out there, the better experience everyone is going to have. I mean, a lot of people have been collecting for a really, really long time, and there's knowledge that's tied up that just needs to get out there regardless. And that's one of the reasons why I really appreciate your podcast and the variety of people that you have on it, is because that's what this is. It's spreading information. And I think that's so important in this hobby, especially with it being so new and so fresh on a larger scale, that the more info that gets out there, the better everyone can collect, and the easier of a time that people are going to have. And that way, you're not going to get people who spend, $3,000 on a trilogy, GTA game or something like that.
Well put. And I'm going to take that compliment. But no, thanks for coming on. Thank you for everyone listening. And as always, enjoy the hunt.